Now, there's a fierce debate raging across South Africa's private security industry. Proposed amendments to the Private Security Industry Regulation Act have triggered widespread concern, with fears that they could cripple operations, cause job losses, or worse, leave communities less protected. While PSIRA insists the intention is not to disarm the industry, but to regulate excessive force and improve public safety, many stakeholders remain unconvinced. And joining us to analyse the implications of the draft amendments is Chad Thomas, a seasoned forensic investigator with the IRS Forensic Investigations. Chad, good to speak to you. Now, let's start with the basics. What do these draft amendments propose, and why are they causing such alarm in the private security industry?
Hugo, good afternoon to you and to the viewers, and thank you for inviting me onto the show. Look, this is a double-edged sword. These proposals that have come out as of the 28th of March, and there's been a period of time given to give comment, kind of restrict the use of firearms by the private security industry in certain areas and for certain purposes. Now, one must understand that when I say it's a double-edged sword, we need security. We've spoken extensively, you and I, in previous inserts about the assistance that the security industry has given both the police as well as the state as force multipliers, and the fact that they've been able to assist in crime prevention projects like Operation Chanel, etc. When one looks at the size of the security industry compared to the size of the police, one understands that there are a lot of registered security officers. We're talking on just under 3 million, of which just over 600,000 are actually employed in the industry, whereas you've got 180,000 police officers, maybe 70,000 soldiers, and then a couple of thousand correctional services. But when you look at the amount of weapons in the security industry compared to what the police, the military, correctional services, traffic departments and metro police have, it's a minute amount. You're talking about around 130,000 weapons in the security industry compared to millions of weapons controlled by the state. Now, the reason PSIRA is so concerned, and we've heard what Manabela Chowk has had to say, he's come out and he's tried to allay fears, is that they want to get rid of the rogue actors within the industry. And there are rogue actors, but the rogue actors make up an absolute minority of an industry that's doing so much good in supporting the police, in supporting communities, in protecting businesses, and in protecting the civilians of our land.
Chad, I'd imagine that there must be some statistics that PSIRA has to, I suppose, affirm the misuse or abuse of firearms by private security firms. Do we have an idea on those numbers?
So in the last financial year, I think the figure was around about 800 weapons within the security industry had been lost or stolen. One must remember that just like police officers are targeted for their weapons, so are security officers targeted for their weapons. We've seen armed response officers killed and disarmed. We've seen people during cash in transit heists disarming security officers. So a lot of those weapons that are purportedly lost are not actually lost. They're stolen by criminals while these security officers are trying to protect their cargo, trying to protect their the persons that they are protecting, the properties that they are protecting. And we're seeing the exact same thing playing out within the South African Police Service. We're seeing policemen being ambushed. We're seeing their weapons being taken from them. So in the greater scheme of things, it's not like there's this huge loss of weapons within the security industry. There's a minority of bad players. PSIRA needs to focus on this minority of bad players. But of course, we need to ensure that the security companies that are actively involved in the industry are correctly vetted, and that PSIRA conducts the correct oversight as the regulatory authority for this massive industry.
Chad, where is the line between protection and over-regulation? Because it almost seems that's what we're having to deal with.
I think that's the greatest concern. We can't go into a state of over-regulation. And I think this is a lot like Trump's art of the deal. Start with the worst possible case scenario, take it to the industry so that you can negotiate from a seriously hard perspective and come down to some or other happy medium. We agree that the bad actors have to be rooted out of the industry. We agree that these white light cavalcades where people are using bodyguards to settle their own personal squabbles, where taxi owners are buying security companies that have weapons to fight proxy wars, we agree that that has to be eliminated. But as I've stressed so many times during this interview, that makes up a tiny minority of an industry that does so much good. We must understand that when you look at Business Against Crime South Africa, they've set up the E2 project. The Civilian Crime Intelligence Network have set up ops rooms and war rooms around the province. These are organizations that are bringing together the security industry with the state law enforcement, both on a national perspective, provincial and local perspective, to fight crime. And you can't expect security officers to be disarmed considering the high rates of criminal violence in South Africa that we're experiencing.
Now, one proposed clause that limits firearms in public spaces like malls or schools. From a risk management point of view, does that compromise public safety?
Look, I believe that, and I watched the insert on Newzroom Afrika with Ribatika Chalk, and he made a lot of sense when he spoke about how there would have to be risk assessments done, how they would need to determine what the weapons are going to be used for. Like I mentioned, a lot of people have taken advantage of the fact that weapons are available within the security industry. Rogue players have bought up security companies. We've seen it in the Western Cape. We've seen it in Gauteng. We've seen it in the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal, so that they can access legitimate weapons to use for illicit means. Protecting a school, for example, with firearms, we need to question from a risk perspective, is it necessary? We need to distinguish why we would need weapons in a shopping mall. I know some shopping malls had weapons outside of the mall, and within the retail area where there were a lot of consumers, there were no firearms. But we've seen a lot of malls that have been attacked. We've seen a lot of kidnappings taking place outside schools. So we see a concern from the consumer that perhaps they need the use of private security officials that are in fact armed to protect their children, to protect their businesses. But like the head of PSIRA said, he said, let's have a risk assessment and let's not use weapons excessively. Let's make sure that they're used for the correct purpose. They can't be used for white light brigades, for people with egos that want to settle squabbles.
Finally, Chad, what would you recommend as a more balanced approach to reform, one that ensures accountability without actually destabilising the sector?
PSIRA, together with industry players like Sincere, SASA, together with organizations like Business Against Crime South Africa, the Civilian Crime Intelligence Network, need to come together with SAPS and determine the way forward to formalize partnerships. E2 is semi-formalized. It needs to be more formalized. We need to see far more public-private sector participation. And in the short term, we're not going to solve the issue of violent crime. We need the support of the security industry, and we can't be pushing them away at this point in time. We should rather be embracing the services that they can offer.
Tad Thomas, IRS Forensic Investigator, appreciate your time in that conversation, calling on PSIRA and relevant authorities to work together.